Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to finally take a look at Elden Ring. I first off want to start by saying that the reason that this review got pushed so far back, well actually a couple reasons. First reason is, I just love this game so much. I was constantly playing it. I've already beaten this game multiple times, and every second I had, I was playing Elden Ring. Also on top of that, there's just so much to do and so much that I loved about this game. I honestly didn't know where to begin. And so it kind of got pushed back because I kept putting it off because there was just so much to talk about that I just kind of almost didn't want to do it. But I really want to do it at the same time. But without further ado, guys, let's just hop right into it. I do want to start off by saying that I'm going to try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. But this is your spoiler warning here, just in case I do spoil something. Starting off first, guys, with the story. The story is kind of just like all the other From Software's previous titles. It's, pretty vague if I'm being honest. You piece the story together through small cutscenes, dialogue, and item descriptions. Although Elden Ring's story is probably one of the easiest From Software games to follow. And with that being said, it's still not super easy, but I did have somewhat of an idea of what the overall story was by the end of the game. And of course, after beating it multiple times, I do have a much better understanding of what's going on, what main characters, what big plot points are happening. And I couldn't say that about, Dark Souls 3 or Bloodborne. It was still kind of like I'm not fully aware of what's going on until after beating it multiple times. But Elden Ring is definitely much more easy to follow. Just not super easy if you're expecting like a God of War or Ghost of Tsushima. But I would still say it's the easiest of its own From Software titles. But, with that being said, I actually kind of love not knowing the full story. I love piecing together the story the more I play. I love the mystery. I love finding how deep and complex the story goes. Also, with this game too, the side quests, I feel, have a lot more of an impact onto the story, the overall story, than some of the previous games that From Software has made. Like, specifically, Ronnie's storyline is totally optional, and you'd literally be missing out on a big chunk of lore by just missing her quest. And there's a few other, like, there's Blide, which kind of Blide also mixes together with Ronnie. So there's, like, quite a few side quests that if you miss, like, you're just cutting out big context of what's going on in the story. Moving on to the gameplay. I've always loved the gameplay from Software games. They've always followed, somewhat of a similar combat style, minus Sekiro and Bloodborne to an extent. Elden Ring and the gameplay, its likeness is closely related to Dark Souls 3, I would say. You guys have probably heard that echoed multiple times. But it's definitely the closest related to Dark Souls 3. There is a vast variety of armors and weapons, with a few fan favorites returning, like the Moon Knight Greatsword, amongst a bunch of others. Also, there is a ton of armor sets that just look absolutely incredible. I think Elden Ring has some of my favorite armor sets in the game, or that they've ever created. Some of their armor sets just look freaking fantastic, and I love it. And just like any of the other From Software games, they have tons of weapons, tons of, armor sets, tons of shields. They just have tons of variety. And that's the same here. Like I said, this game is similar most closely to Dark Souls, or Dark Souls 3. Although I have noticed that there are bits and pieces sprinkled in from their various other titles. Like you got the stealth from Sekiro. There's even a talisman in the game that's similar to Bloodborne's health regain system. And of course power stancing from Dark Souls 2. Along with the many weapons Elden Ring has, it has tons of spells and incantations. The spells in Elden Ring are not only freaking incredible and epic to cast, they're just so awesome looking. There's so many. Downside that I've kind of found is that some spells will have an incredibly high faith/intelligence requirements, but the damage just isn't there. They don't do as much damage as I'd like, and kind of vice versa. There's been times where I found a spell that had somewhat low requirements, but put out a decent amount of damage for what you got. So I just feel like some of the spells are a little bit unbalanced. Of course, there are some of those that have really high faith or intelligence and still put out a ton, but I've noticed that there are a few that don't. I'd also like to note that I have not been able to use all of these spells. I do plan on doing a faith, or actually, I do plan on doing a spellcaster build on one of my next playthroughs, so that way I can invest a lot of those points into intelligence so I can get some of those higher, incantations and spells. A new feature that Elden Ring has is called Ashes of War, which is like a unique skill that you can add to your weapon, giving it a new weapon art. And you can add these to pretty much any weapon. The only weapons that I've noticed that you can't add and that they are incompatible are like special weapons, such as the Golden Halberd, and legendary weapons such as the Grafted Greatsword, both of which already have their own unique arts and skills. Some of the Ashes of War can actually be extremely powerful and have been super useful with fighting tons of enemies and some boss fights. Although I didn't use them too much during boss fights, there's a few boss fights that I did, but yeah, there's a ton of Ashes of War, and it's kind of a cool spin. Like, you can just have a regular claymore and add like a frost stomp to it. It's cool. Elden Ring also swapped the swapped the rings for talismans, but they're basically the same thing. They serve the same function. Actually, one of my favorite new features that From Software has added, and I guess this kind of goes with accessibility as well, is the Spirit Ashes, or summoning. It's where you sacrifice a little bit of FP or health to summon a spirit to help you in a boss battle, regular battles, a few battles in the open world, and these drastically change the way that the battle goes. Like, facing off against a boss and having that split aggro turns like a boss fight that would have been incredibly hard to a much more manageable fight. Example of this for me is I was fighting Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, like the yellow spirit version that you fight about halfway through the game, and he had beaten me about 5 or 6 times just on my own. And so I was like, alright, well, I guess I'll summon, at the time I had Oleg, so I summoned Oleg, and we demolished Godfrey. Like, it was so fast. Just having that split aggro, that, split second to back up, heal, jump back in, and not having his full attention on you, just dramatically changed how difficult that boss fight was. You know what I mean? Like, I died 5 or 6 times to it, and then the second I summoned, I demolished him. But with that being said, I actually really enjoyed the summons. My only issue is that pretty much every summon kind of ends up funneling down to just using the Mimic tier, with literally every summon kind of paling in comparison the second you obtain the Mimic tier. Another plus that the Spirit Ashes add is that, or I guess don't add, is that when you do summon them, they don't add more HP to the bosses like traditional summonings do. I mean, of course, if you summon like help and stuff, I believe it does add extra HP to the bosses, but just using your normal summoning, it will not actually add any HP, which I think that's what makes these bosses so much easier the second you summon. With the Spirit Ashes and magic being so incredibly powerful, I'd say Elden Ring is probably one of their easiest / most accessible From Software games ever. Outside a few boss encounters like Malenia and Radon, both of those being still extremely difficult even with summons. Shoot, Radon, you can literally summon up to 6 people, and I still struggled with him with 6 summons. But yeah, for anyone that was really wanting an easy mode, just use summoning and magic, and you should be able to blow through this game for most of the part. Another thing that is brand new to From Software games is crafting. I do feel like the crafting here is pretty simple. You craft like your arrows and your items that can get rid of status effects and whatnot. But if I'm being completely honest, I didn't use the crafting as much as I have in other open world games, which I think is actually kind of a plus. I always found it super tedious having to stop what I was doing to craft arrows or to craft this and that, like in Horizon Forbidden West or Zero Dawn, where I ran out of arrows, so I'd have to stop and craft arrows. Here, crafting is there, but it's definitely not vital. You don't have to use it, but it is there. And I actually enjoyed them giving you the option, but not making it an essential part of the game. This is definitely still a From Software game through and through. So if you don't want to use any of those healing items or status effects or arrows, you don't have to. Moving on to the open world part of Elden Ring. If I'm being honest, when they first announced that this game was going to be open world, it actually made me really nervous. I have been super burnt out of open world games. They seem to follow the exact same format over and over again, and it kind of made me nervous. And the second I started playing Elden Ring, let me just say this is the best open world game I have ever played. Like, literally, I'm not even joking. Like I said, I've been extremely burnt out of all these open world games. Even though I liked even though I liked Horizon Forbidden West, they still follow that same formula, the exact same format as like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, all those other just open world. They all seem to be the same. You open up the map and there's just literally littered with things to do. And I'm a little bit OCD, and whenever I get to a new area, I try and do everything in that one area before moving on to the next. And so when I look at these maps that are just filled, from inch to inch with things to do, it gives me like anxiety, and I have like no idea where to start, and it almost makes me not want to do it. Elden Ring literally does the exact opposite of all of those games. It starts out by giving you just a super small part of the map, a part that I still thought was actually fairly large until you really see how big the map truly is. And there is 0 map icons. There's no markers, there's nothing on the map. The only thing that shows up are the sites of grace after you rest at them, or whenever you light them, and markers that you place there yourself. Elden Ring literally just hands you the map and says, go explore. Go do whatever you want to do. Every now and then, of course, the site of grace will point you in the direction of the main story, kind of where you should be kind of heading, but it doesn't really, it just kind of points. It's like a little arrow, and it's like, hey, go west, go southwest, and that's it. That could be how far do I go, especially since you don't have the full map unlocked. You have no idea what to do next, and I absolutely loved it. If I were to say, like, one sentence kind of describing Elden Ring's open world, it would be that I am in a constant state of discovery. I feel like every time I turn a corner, I'm discovering something new. Something that I've never found on previous playthroughs, whether it's a new cave or a dungeon or a new boss fight. There's literally so much content in this game, it's absolutely insane. I have a couple of friends and coworkers that are all playing Elden Ring, and when we get together and we talk about it, it just is mind-boggling how we are playing the same game, but having totally different experiences. Like, they're running into boss fights and NPCs that I have never found on my multiple playthroughs. And I actually love that about Elden Ring, that we can all be playing something different, but having vastly different experiences. It makes for good conversation, and I'm like, hey dude, like, where did you find this? And they're like, hey, where's that boss fight that you fought? Like, it's just insane how much content it is in this game. Oh, I also forgot to mention this, but Elden Ring gives you a mount. Traverse the vast world of the lands between, they give you the noble steed of Torrent. He kind of looks like a horse with horns, but riding Torrent was actually way better than I thought it was going to be. Kind of like going back to the open world. When I heard this game was going to be open world and that you would have a mount, these are like things that From Software has never done, and it made me nervous. I was like, am I going to like this? But don't worry guys, the riding in this, the mounts in this, or I guess mount, you only ride Torrent, all feels really good. The handling of Torrent feels really nice. There's actually mounted combat, which is also nice. I didn't use it as much, just because Torrent does have a health bar, and if he gets hit too many times, he'll disappear or will even die, and that you won't be able to get him to respawn unless you rest or you use one of your healing flasks to bring him back. But overall, I love Torrent. Riding the horse felt really nice, and it was kind of essential to traverse these huge world of the lands between. Talking about the lands between, there are so many jaw-dropping set pieces in this game. whether it's looking off a mountain down at the valley, the lands between, or going deep underground with a night sky somehow, is just freaking absolutely incredible. There's so many scenes that actually made me stop and stare on more than a few occasions. This game is absolutely beautiful. Now moving on to a part that is literally my favorite part of almost every From Software game, the bosses. Elden Ring is plumb full of bosses, and I guess you would call them mini bosses. I believe there's like something like over 80 bosses total in the game, which is freaking insane. As far as difficulty goes, it's kind of hard to place. I think Elden Ring is one of the easier games overall, but at the same time it has some of its hardest bosses that like From Software has ever made. I think a lot of this stems back to them making Elden Ring as open world. And what I mean by that, an example of it is if I was stuck in, let's say, Dark Souls 3, and I'd have two options, right? If I was stuck on a boss, I'd either have to get good, figure out the boss moveset, and figure out how to beat him, get good, or I can leave and go farm up and hope that it was enough to beat the boss. And if that wasn't enough, then I am stuck. But in Elden Ring, if I was stuck, I just go somewhere else. You can pretty much go anywhere in this game, and after getting stuck in that new area, I'd be like, alright, I'm gonna go try that boss that I was stuck on. Which I actually really loved, because I never felt the need to go farm and grind out a few levels like I have in like Bloodborne or Dark Souls 3 even, where I'm stuck and I'm like, I need to get those few extra levels and see if it'll turn the tide. Here it's like I never actually took time to grind or took time to go farm souls to level up a few times. Like, that never happened, not even once. Yeah, it just happened naturally, just from traversing and going back and forth. But there's some absolutely incredible boss fights in this game that were just insane. From Godric the Grafted to the Fire Giant, Star Scourge Radahn, to Godfrey, the First Elden Lord. Elden Ring truly has some of the most epic boss fights, I'd say, ever in gaming. Just on the boss fights alone, they're enough to keep me coming back again and again. Just because of how fun and awesome they were. Minus Commander Nile. I freaking hate that boss. But all jokes aside, guys, the boss battles in Elden Ring were incredible, and some of my favorite in all of From Software's titles. My final thoughts, guys, on Elden Ring. So, I have been playing video games since as far back as I can remember. And it has been a very long time since I've been this invested in a game, like, period. I would have to really sit down and think the last time I was this, like, addicted to playing a game. Elden Ring is a masterpiece. It just is. Anyone who says otherwise just needs to go and play more than like 2 hours of it. Like, this game is absolutely amazing. And like I said, part of what took me so long to make this review is because I just couldn't stop playing it. Every free moment I had, I was playing it. It's very rare that a game is this hyped and actually delivers on that hype. From its stunning world, to its constant state of discovery, to the absolutely incredible fights, Elden Ring will go down in history, I think, as one of the greatest games ever made. And has become my absolutely favorite game of all time. I would give Elden Ring, if I were to give it a rating, it'd be easily a 10 out of 10. This game is nothing short of a masterpiece. I hope that more open world games, and I guess developers in general, see what Elden Ring has done and accomplished, and kind of break away from that standard open world formula. It's crazy, because for such a niche game, Elden Ring has certainly shook up the gaming industry. And that's gonna be it, guys. Dude, this game is absolutely amazing. And I'm probably gonna go play it right after this video. After talking about it for what, 20 minutes, it's just like, alright, time to go play some Elden Ring. But that's gonna be it, guys, for my video. Let me know down in the comments what you guys have thought of Elden Ring. Have you played it yet? Do me a big favor though, leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll catch you guys on the next video.